So now that the flower petals are finished, we're ready to address the center of the flower. So we're going to be doing a salt treatment to it, and I just want to show you a little bit about the salt treatment. As the paper dries and the salt melts into the color that's put on the paper, it creates these little crystals. So that's the effect that we're going for in the middle of the flower. Now obviously not these colors, but this gives you an idea of what the effect should be if we time it correctly and put the salt on the wet surface at just the right moment. So we're going to be working with two colors on our center. We're going to be working with yellow ochre and burnt umber. And our first step, and of course I do have my salt container handy right nearby because I know I'm going to need to be able to get a pinch of salt when I need to. I'm going to start, and again I have my number 6 round brush, but you could use the number 4, would probably be a better choice. I lent mine to someone, and a student, and I didn't get it back, so I'm not sure where my number 4 is. But right now I'm using a number 6. I'm just being very controlled, and I'm putting water, just plain clean water, into the entire center of the flower area. And I'm checking with the reflection in the lights, make sure I've got it everywhere. And now that I have the wet water in place, I'm going to be doing a little bit of wet on wet, just touching the tip of my brush with yellow ochre. And I'm kind of going to do just dots all around the center of the flower. Now I've got plenty of places where it's just wet paper, so I'm going to clean my brush and wipe it twice, and I'm going to grab some of the burnt umber. That's the darker of your two browns. Wherever I didn't touch down with the ochre, I'm going to touch down with the umber. So I want to kind of get a balance of both colors in the center. Now I know that doesn't look that great yet, so I'm going to put a little sprinkle of salt in there. I just pinched it with my fingers, and I'm sprinkling it over the top. I don't want to drop a pile of it, that's not going to work. But if you look closely, let me move this in really close so you can see, the salt crystals are sitting right there on the surface, and they're kind of dispersed around the surface so that there's no clump in the middle. That's what you want to have. So, and I know there's some white spots, and that's okay. So I've just sprinkled a little bit of salt in there. I'm just going to add a little bit more, and I want to actually watch it as it dries, because if my paper was too wet and the salt is dry, or salt is melting and the paper is still wet, it's just going to kind of run around and create not very clean crystals. So I'm going to kind of watch it. Now it's just a small area, so it'll dry rather quickly. So as I'm watching, if I'm noticing that my salt completely disappears and there's no and the paper's still wet, I know that that salt is not going to create an impression. So I'm just adding a few little grains here and there, but I'm going to keep an eye on it. It looks like it's doing just fine right now. I'm not going to see those crystals right away. I have to wait until the paper's dry to actually see the crystals. Now I should start to see them emerge as the paper dries, but I'm not going to see them right away. So I'll come back when this has dried and we can check out the crystals, remove the salt, and then start to talk about how to finish the center. So the center of the flower is now dried. There is still some salt on there, which I can rub over the surface to remove. That can get dumped right into a trash can. I'm going to push mine off to the side for now, and I'll get it later. I want to make sure that I rub over it till all the salt is removed. And that feels pretty smooth. All right, so now I'm ready to do finishing touches. And for this part, I'm going to need the liner brush, which is the one with the really, actually you're going to use not your liner brush, you're going to use your number 2 round, which is your smallest round brush. It has a very tiny point, so I'm going to use that wet, and I'm going to get some burnt umber in a very concentrated brush full of it, and I'm going to make some small dots and dashes around the perimeter of the flower center to create some texture. I don't want to make it look like a typewriter did it, so I want to make it a little less predictable. When you see that the color is getting lighter, make sure you get a little more pigment on your brush. And I'm just going to create like a row and a half, I would say. 1 by a half, I mean, I'm not going to create a second row. I'm just going to kind of go definitely around the edges and then inward a bit as well, because I don't want to have just a row around the edge because it's going to look like it's too planned out. And of course, the flower's from nature, so it should have a little bit of inconsistency in the way that it's applied. So I want to create some dashes toward the center. Almost finished. And so at this point I've gone all the way around. I'm just going to add just a few other little marks in the middle. And then my flower is finished.